I rise today as a member of both the Senate Appropriations Committee on Transportation and as a member of the Senate Commerce Committee to discuss what I believe is a shocking display of mismanagement and incompetence by the leadership of the Department of Transportation and the Federal Aviation Administration. The Federal Administration Aviation says that the sequester will result in as many as 6,700 delays per day. And to put this in context, in the worst weather day in 2012, we had 2,900 flight delays, so the FAA's projected 6,700 delays per day would more than double the worst day in 2012. To me, Madam President, this is a disturbing evidence of both the Department of Transportation and the FAA's lack of planning leading up to what we all knew was going to take place, and in fact, a law signed by the President. We've known for a year this may happen. The President signed it into law. We are now many months down the line, and the FAA comes along and says, oh, we just need to let you know just a few days ago that, by the way, we're going to implement this part of the sequestration. This across-the-board furlough is especially surprising that given previous announcements that their guiding principle during this sequestration would be implementing a plan that, let me quote, maintains safety and minimizes the impact to the highest number of travelers. So announcing 3 days or so before they implement this plan that potentially results in as much as 6,700 delays per day, that minimizes the impact of the highest number of travelers. This is disingenuous. It's mismanagement at its worst. It's incompetence at its worst. It's a failure to do what every agency has been required to do, and that is plan for this. And now that it has been in law for several months, there is no excuse for simply saying, oh, we didn't have time to put this in place, and so this is what we're going to do. Now, I voted against sequestration because it treats every federal program on an equal basis, regardless of its necessity, its effectiveness, its essential nature, versus a lot of things that are done around here that consume a lot of taxpayers' money that even shouldn't be done, but certainly don't rise to the level of essential functions of the federal government. Clearly, keeping our skies safe and getting our passengers from point to point is an essential function. We need those air traffic controllers, and the plan that has put forth by the FAA flies in the face of their own judgment and their own statements in terms of what they needed to do. And instead of furloughing 47,000 employees and causing significant delays for travelers, they should have been seeking reductions elsewhere. We tried to give these essential agencies the flexibility necessary to do so. Unfortunately, the President did not support that effort, and the majority party here in the Senate did not support that effort, and therefore they have no reason to point their fingers over here and say, oh, well, sequestration is so terrible. Sequestration is so terrible, and that we never should have been in this place in this position in the first place. The FAA, just for the record, could have considered cutting back on the $541 million it spends on consultants. In other words, those that have been hired to work at the FAA need to spend, can't do the job themselves, so they need to spend $541 million to hire outside consultants. And the $2.7 billion it spends on non-personnel costs. But instead of looking at how to better manage their own administration, they turned to furloughing up to 10% of the air traffic controllers, creating up to 6,700 delays per day. And then they said they hadn't had time to work this out. Hadn't had time, they've had months worth of time since the law was signed. And how about the time that is now wasted as people stand in airports for 3 and 4 hours waiting to board their plane, and the disruption, and this is in good weather. And so that is in itself a lame excuse that the FAA has put forward. I did not vote for the sequestration. I thought, as I said before, it was an inadequate way to deal with the necessary need to cut spending here, but let's cut out the less than functional. Let's cut out the, well, we'd like to do that but can't afford to do that right now, and focus on the essential services and give them the opportunity to manage that. And clearly, FAA and the Department of Transportation have not management. It's incompetence. Congress was only informed just days ahead of time, and so it's been difficult for us to react, and this kicked in to the surprise of the airlines and it's kicked into the surprise of Congress. But clearly, what we have learned that despite a year of advance warning and then refusing to analyze all possible alternatives to minimize impacts to the traveling public, it appears it's hard to come to any other conclusion that this is a politically motivated decision to inflict as much pain on Americans as possible in an effort to make the case that sequestration never should have taken place in the first place. That a 4% cut across the board out of the FAA budget is simply something they can't manage. In other words, asking them to do what they did in 2010 with the money that was allocated to them then, no, we can't do that now. This is 2012. 2013, and we need this extra money, and we need these hundreds of billions of dollars to continue to hire consultants. And don't ask us to make the kinds of decisions that every business in this country has had to make over the last 4 or 5 years in this malaise of an economic growth following a recession has taken place. Don't ask us to do what every family's had to do. We're the government. We're the federal government. And how dare you impose a 4% cut on what we do? We need that every year because we need to keep hiring more and pay more consultants, and we're not capable of managing. It's just shocking. I hope the President will understand that if he wants effective, efficient government, he's going to have to hire effective, efficient management. He's going to have to give them the instructions to do what every business in America has had to do during this time of difficult and slow, a difficult economy and slow economic growth. So I think we ought to take a very close look at the kind of decisions that have been made at the Department of Transportation, the lack of competent management, and the mismanagement of taxpayers' money. This administration needs to step up to the plate and take some. The President, as I said, created and signed into law the sequestration policy. His administration has known for more than 12 months that this policy was imminent, and they have done nothing to prepare effectively. Mr. President, Madam President, our country is a long way from getting our spending under control. So it's time the administration stops looking for excuses and starts managing its budget effectively. With that, I yield the floor.